This is part 2 of a series that we have entitled The Biblical Doctrine of Business and Economy. We have dubbed it DEBT, and that stands for the Divine Economic and Business Transaction Systems. We have looked at what a debt is in a threefold way, what business is, and now we are beginning to define an economy. We saw that it's very important to define an economy philosophically, because what your goals are with an economy are going to determine the gathering of resources and so forth. So it's very, very important to have an understanding that the Bible has one and only way to run a government and a business and to have an economy. And we are in trouble today because we are fast departing from the capitalistic system, which is the Bible view, to a socialistic system. So, from the philosophical then we go to the technical. And that is the setting, structure, or stimuli of a business for a particular country or what have you. And we have what's known as technically a market economy. That's capitalist. A free market, free enterprise system. And I had a question on Matthew 20 whenever I talked about the man going to hire other men, and said, well, that's socialism, because he came to the end of the day and he paid the workers the same price as he did. But see, the problem with that is that, and we'll discuss this further this evening, the problem with that is that he went to the individual to hire them. There was no collective bargaining there, none whatsoever. Each individual could hire on as they agreed or disagreed. They could agree to work or agree not to, and the employer could agree to hire them or not. They were totally free. That's free market, you see. And also, the trickle down came when the man found that he could make more money by hiring more workers. Their skill became more valuable to him at the end of the day. And that is the free enterprise system. Your skill is valuable to an employer, and the more valuable it is, the more he's willing to pay you in order to make him money. So there is profit incentive both for the employer and the employee. And he did not get paid for doing nothing. If he didn't hire on, he didn't get paid. Now the socialist system says that you tax the employer and give this guy money anyway. Phooey. They hired on and got paid, and when their skills became more valuable, they got paid a higher wage. And that is the principle there. We'll look at it more fully this evening. But that's a market economy. Well, where are we headed today, technically? To a political economy, where the government goes into the business of hiring people and creating jobs and business for people. And again, that's not the Christian way. You don't tax industry so the government can go into competition against them. And that's where we're headed. Communism and socialism do not work, but Lucifer thinks it does, and that's why he wants to bring in a world socialistic system. It is pictured by the clay in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. All right, generally then an economy is the management and the movement of the resources of a country or corporation, what have you, with regard to production, distribution, and consumption of the monetary or material wealth. And it's talking about developing it, getting raw resources in order to come in and develop them, and then to sell them and to maintain them and so forth. And again, these things are contingent upon your philosophy, your goals. Is it profit or utilitarianism? You see, Christianity today is buying into the socialistic picture by the constant emphasis on the practical. Oh, you got to learn the Bible. Well, it's doctrine that renews your mind, the whole realm of doctrine that renews your thinking. But today, if it's not practical, I mean, some pastor doesn't tell you, point one, this is what you do, instead of just teaching the Bible, and then you come to an understanding of how to apply it in your own circumstance. Thou shalt not steal is applicable to us no matter where we are. are. But that's a doctrine, you see. Its application is up to you where you are. And so therefore it is utilitarian. That's where we're heading. But of course we've pulled away from that kind of teaching to a purely doctrinal standpoint where you learn the Word of God, it changes your thinking, it transforms your life, and you live it naturally before the Lord. So philosophy does count. Okay. Now let's note then a couple of things here. The economic or spiritual interpretation of history. You're going to find why we're moving back to socialism. You're going to find why capitalism is failing. Not because it's not a true doctrine, but simply because men are rejecting it in favor of liberal thinking. Everybody's equal. Everybody deserves money. Everybody deserves an equal share of the pie. And it goes all the way from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to the Rainbow Coalition of Jesse Jackson to the liberalism of the Democrats and so forth. And it's liberal. We're heading that way. Our current administration, and that's one thing, it's very difficult. We always want to obey those in authority over us. We always want to respect them. We want to pray for them. But their thinking is wrong business-wise. Their thinking is wrong economically because they are buying into what's known as economic determinism. That is, that the course of history is determined by material factors only. That when you direct material to the masses, then you are going to bring in a utopian situation where everybody is happy, everybody gets along, there are no more wars, no more fighting, because everybody is satisfied with this equal piece of the pie. But the problem with that is this: it doesn't work. Men have an old sin nature. I do it for humanity. I'm living for the other person. Oh yeah, right. That's really true. You've got the other, you're so noble. You've got the other person in mind when you work. You've got your self-interest in mind, or unless what they're trying to do is purge yourself from the old sin nature and its covetousness and jealousy apart from God. Simply by true grit. I can do it. I'm living for the other man. I'm my brother's keeper. You are not. He's his own keeper. You are your keeper. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. Obviously, some people do get legitimately bound by poverty, by a turn in life, and so forth. And it is our job to be compassionate and help out. The Good Samaritan is a prime example of that. But how many times do you think the Good Samaritan will help out this one fellow who keeps falling prey to these bandits? You know, after about the second or third time, I'd say, look, fella, I've done this once or twice. Now you're on your own. And that's what we need to say with a world of welfare mentality. Look, we've helped you out and we've established this. We've trained you. Now work. That's the point. Work. You have a debt. Your belly empties out every 4 hours. Now you need to work to fill it back up. That's your responsibility and not mine. But again, economic determinism says that if you simply direct material to masses, you will bring in a utopian situation. All right, now where does that come from? That comes from a theory of reality from a fellow by the name of Karl Marx. Frederick Engels and Karl Marx came up with something known as dialectical materialism. And you know what their basis is, their conclusion, not the basis, but the conclusion that they came up with and all of it was that material is more important than the spiritual. That's why in America today, you can go to statistics around the world, and we come up 14th to 15 nations in science, 9 to 10 in math, and so forth. Because America today is emphasizing material counts. Madonna sings, I'm a what? I'm a material girl. You know, feelings, the body, money, the glitz, the glamour, and so forth. That's what I'm all about. Now, she is getting that, of course, from Marx. The material is more important than the spiritual. Well, when you multiply that by the masses, then you have to divvy it all up equally to make everybody happy. I'm not satisfied if somebody has more than me. And that's what socialism is. And it's called dialectical materialism. Matter is more important in time and logically than mind or the spiritual pursuits. All right. Now, in Leviticus chapter 20, we see actually that is not true. History doesn't revolve around economy, but spiritual things. Leviticus 26, where it says, verse number 3. Leviticus 26, verse 3. If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, then I will give you rain in due season, and the land shall yield her what? Increase. And the trees of the field shall yield their fruit, and your threshing shall reach the vintage, and so forth. On and on, I'll give peace in your land. I'll drive, verse number 6, the evil beast out of it. You'll chase your enemies out, and so forth. Ye shall, verse number 10, eat the old store and bring forth the old because of the new. You can't keep up with the storing all of the food I'm going to send your way for doing what? Hearing my voice, following my ways. Now, you want an interpretation of history, you look at the history of Israel. When they hearkened to God, He sent them economic blessings. He increased and blessed their businesses. When they did not, He sent them economic hardships. America is in the condition she's in. Somalia is in the condition she's in because God sent them blessings and they said, no thanks, would rather be Muslims. No thanks, would rather follow the witch doctor. And so God says, fine, no thanks. I'm going to break your back because I'm going to break your economy. And then we have the world community. We have to feel sorry for these people, and we got to help one another out. See, for the first time in history, we now have had a major military movement on a humanitarian basis. That's a precedent. For humanitarian purposes and reasons, we now, brother to brother, are feeding others who are Muslims and who deny the Christian faith for the most part in a collective situation. Now, interpretation of history. We're headed toward a socialistic stance globally. If you want to understand where we're going, that's where we're going. That's why America elected the president and vice president that we have elected, because they're fitting in with the global world system. The Pope said, I do not like Eastern-style communism. I do not like Western-style capitalism. I like socialism. And that's where the world is heading. All right. Where did they get that? Karl Marx. If you buy into that system, nothing but a socialist. And you may be saved, but you're not Christian in your theology if you're a socialist. Verse 14. But if you will not hearken unto me, these are the cycles of discipline that we've talked about, and will not do all these commandments, if ye despise my statutes, if your soul abhor my judgments, that you will not do my commandments, you break my covenant, I also will do this to you. I will appoint over you terror, consumption, the burning ague, and shall consume your eyes, see sickness and so forth. Verse 17, I will set my face against you. Verse 18, if you still not do it, I'll punish you 7 times more. I'll break the pride of your power. Heaven will be as iron. Note what it says. For your land, verse 20, shall not yield her increase, neither shall the trees of the land yield their fruits. I won't bless your business. That is the correct interpretation of history. Now, Marx says, and so do our liberal administrators today, that if we just give materials to the masses, man will be happy. And God right here says, it's the spiritual first. You tend to obey me, and I'm going to send blessings your way because you have inner capacity to appreciate it. If not, I'm not going to send it your way. And it's been a long time coming, but America is going the way of the dodo because of our stupidity in liberal democratic thinking that everybody deserves this, that, and the other when they do not work, they do not prepare for life, they do not use their volition to contribute back to the system by way of work. Dialectical materialism is wrong. Time and again, God's Word says so. Turn to Deuteronomy chapter 28. Deuteronomy chapter 28. Again, basically a reiteration of these same precepts. 28 verse 1. Note the blessing on business. You want to have your business blessed? Find out the Christian principles of business and economics. Then you'll be truly blessed. You want to have your life blessed? Find out the Christian principles of earning money and giving money. How to spend it, how to give it, what to give it to, how much to give, and so forth. Then your life is going to be blessed. And may I remind you that abundance is not necessarily a blessing if you do not have the capacity to use it for the Lord. It's a King Midas curse. And poverty is not necessarily a curse if you have inner resources of Bible doctrine to see you through. Example, Jesus Christ. When Jesus Christ came, he said, I don't have a house. I only have one good coat. But he did that. Though he was rich, he became poor, that we by his poverty might become rich. It's an exception to the rule. He did that as an exception so that we might be blessed. But what is Jesus Christ eternally? Poor or rich? Rich. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, the wealth in every mine. That's rich. Not only that, he owns it on this planet and on all the other planets and throughout all of heaven. Deuteronomy 28. Shall come to pass if thou shalt hearken diligently to the voice of the Lord, to observe his commandments, that I will set thee high above all nations of the earth. What's becoming of America today? We're becoming in common with all of the nations of the earth. It's the European common market. We're going to have things in common with them, or the French farmers over there are going to unite. Have you heard what they're doing there? We have to unite with our farming brothers here if we're ever going to compete with America. Well, that's what we're all becoming common. They had all things in common. Yeah, well, that is not the free enterprise system. God says, if you do it, I'll set you high above all nations. Now, this is pertaining to Israel, but if a covenant nation can do it, a client nation can do it. And America is a client nation, but she is fast losing that status. Note what it says. All these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee. I like that. You can't outrun the blessings. No matter how fast you go, if you're following the Lord, the blessings are going to catch up with you and surpass your enthusiasm, your aggressiveness in business. If you hearken to the voice of the Lord, you'll be blessed in the city, blessed in the field, blessed, verse 4, in the body, blessed in the fruit of the ground, blessed in your cattle, blessed in your kine, the flocks of the sheep. Blessed you'll be in the basket and in your store. Blessed with an abundance because you have hearkened to the Lord and followed his principles. It's the spiritual interpretation of history. Now, socialists want to collectively bargain and so forth in an endeavor to get an equal piece of the pie. God says, if you just simply follow me, I'm going to send blessings that will overtake you, more abundance than anybody. Verse 15. It shall come to pass, if you'll not hearken to the voice of the Lord, that these curses shall come upon thee, and no, overtake thee. America has been borrowing to get ahead of the curses, but we're fast being overtaken by the debt. Cursed in the city, cursed in the field, cursed in the basket, cursed in your store. Now, what is the true view of history? Turn to John chapter 6. This is known as spiritual determinism. For those individuals and people who have a tendency to open their hearts to God, want to know Him, want to follow His Word, do not close their hearts totally to Him, but tend to want to do His bidding, history revolves actually around them. Do you know something? That if there's one person here that really wants doctrine, and God is not finished with this dispensation yet, that God will continue to keep the freedom of America so that you can meet right here under your right pastor teacher to learn spiritual things. He will move mountains. He will prevent our enemies from overtaking. He'll even keep that curse away from the door for that one person that He wants to inculcate with Bible doctrine. He moves history around maturing or mature believers. That's the spiritual interpretation. Why did Japan fail? Because they're Shintoist. Why did Germany fail? Because they worshipped a man by the name of Adolf Hitler. Time and time again, you can look at nations. The rise and fall of nations depends on whether or not they were positive or negative toward Christ and His Word. Now, it's not material things to the masses that counts. It's spiritual things to those who want spiritual things. That is spiritual determination. Now, Jesus Christ gave us the concept of dialectical spiritualism. John chapter 6, verse number 26. Verily, verily, I say unto you, you seek me not because you saw the miracles, but because ye did eat of the loaves and were filled. Labor not for the meat which perishes. Now, He's obviously not telling them not to work. This was their undue preoccupation, not their primary occupation. Labor not for the meat which perishes, but that meat which endures to everlasting life. Verse number 35. Jesus said unto them, I'm the bread of life. He that comes to me shall never hunger. He that believes on me shall never thirst. And now, verse number 63. And here is dialectical spiritualism. That spiritual things is much more important than the material things, the physical things. Now, Jesus Christ is not saying that the physical things are not important. We're at two extremes here between the materialism and the spiritualism, but there is a middle of the road where all of these financial principles fit. But one tends to drift toward the material and the other tends to drift toward the spiritual. There's a socialistic, there's a capitalistic. There is the Satan-inspired type economy, and there is the God-inspired type economy. Here's the verse of Scripture that gives us dialectic spiritualism. Verse 63, it is the Spirit that quickens, the flesh profits nothing. Karl Marx says spiritual, the mental profits nothing. We bought into that system, and that's why the majority of our kids are dumb. That's why they have to be entertained. That's why they say there's nothing to do in our town. When you look around and they have got the same things here in this town that they do in every other town. Why aren't they busy learning a skill? Why don't they master the academic things? Because half the time you don't even teach them in our schools anymore. We're so busy with social engineering and teaching kids how to get along with one another instead of teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's what belongs in our school. No government should tell this person and that person they've got to get along. If they want to get along, fine. If they don't, that's fine too. It's a free world out in America, but it's fast becoming a bound world to the system of socialism where everybody's equal, everybody's to be respected, no one's to be offended. If you say they're a sinner, you'll have litigation the next week. The Spirit. The words that I speak unto you, they're spirit. They are life, not the material. The material is just temporal. The spiritual, that's eternal. And that's what's more important. And that's what controls history. Now let me show you a prime example, Matthew 4. Who was the one who most directly rebutted dialectic materialism? Jesus Christ. And I'll show you what I mean. Matthew chapter 4, verse number 1. Jesus was led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. But what is his first temptation? His first temptation is going to be against materialism versus spiritualism. Physical things as opposed to spiritual things. When the tempter came to him, oh, by the way, verse 2 says he fasted 40 days and he was hungry. Now, what didn't he do that is the foremost debt that needs to be paid for life? He didn't eat. Now, he was there and he had no food. Now, the tempter came to him and said, If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. Do you see the philosophy? Move matter toward the masses so that they can be fed. Do it apart from the will of God and satisfy yourself, Jesus. Make these stones bread. Perform some miracle. You see, that's what the socialists want. They want some miracle to have these stones to be made bread for the masses. And Jesus Christ said this, and note, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone. If I had my druthers, Lucifer, I'd rather live on the spiritual truths I have on the inside than to break the Father's will and to move the material for my benefit. Now, please don't misunderstand. We're talking about two extreme philosophies here. We're going to have to look at a middle-of-the-road philosophy because God actually does say that for the Christian who knows how to use material things, he can have wealth, he can accumulate wealth. That would probably be the will of God to do so, and it would not be wrong. But only if he has the internal capacity first. The spiritual takes precedent over the material. That's the middle of the road. That's what we'll see. But again, as you can see, we've got some conflicting philosophies here, right here in the United States of America. Our present administration is buying into economic determinism. Give the masses food, and they'll be happy. Whereas you and I have to buy in to spiritual determinism. Give the masses the word, let them decide, and let God bless them or curse them on the basis of their own volitional response to His commands. All right. Now let's go back for the time we have remaining here to Genesis. Genesis chapter 2. We have been in the front part of this book so much, I've almost got my pages worn out here. That's okay. Now, we don't have much time, and so we're going to have to start here this evening. And I hope you'll return. The reason? Because if you don't know the difference between these two interpretations of history, you will ultimately, by peer pressure, by sheer force of numbers of the world, buy into the opposite system. You won't know which one's which. You won't know why God blesses an individual or a corporation or a nation. I personally believe that there may be, and I'm not putting this occupation down because I've learned to appreciate those who know how to clean up and organize and to keep things organized. There's a janitor in a corporation, and that corporation is blossoming, earning abundance. That janitor is a maturing believer. It's not the capabilities of the men up high. It is God blessing that organization because of the janitor who is a super grace believer. And time and again, here, we're never going to change national policy. What is our vote? We cast our vote, but our little group here, we're never going to change the minds of the current administration. But I'll tell you who can change them. God puts kings on the throne and takes them off, according to believers. And if you want to learn doctrine, you'll make an impact in history. Your life will have meaning and definition. All right, Genesis chapter 2. Note verse 16. The Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. We have spent a lot of time regarding the two trees. Verse number 17 talks about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day thou shalt eat thereof, thou shalt surely die. Verse number 9 talks about God caused that which is pleasant to the sight, good for food, the tree of life also, and put it in the midst of the garden. Now you and I have been looking at the tree of death and the tree of life. Dialectical materialism, the tree of death. What did Eve want more than God? Matter. See, that's where we're coming down to. Men say, it takes matter for me to live physically. I don't care if I live spiritually, as long as I can continue on being happy, healthy, good environment, lot of food, my belly filled. And Eve chose the tree of death. Now that is Marxism, socialism, communism, what have you, liberal democracies heading right that direction. Now, Adam and Eve both should have kept the tree of life. Now what is obvious? As long as God allowed them access to the tree of life on a daily basis, they didn't take of the tree of death, what else could they do? They could go to the other trees of the garden. There's a third category of trees there that represents everyday normal temporal life and the way to acquire the blessings of those other trees. You see, that's what it says. Verse 16, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. See, we've often forgotten that category of trees, and that category represents the acquisition of wealth from one of two vantage points. The vantage point of socialism or the material, or the vantage point of spiritualism and material. As long as they had the spiritual, they had access to the other material things. They had capacity for it. As soon as they chose the god of mammon, you can't serve God and mammon. That's the point. As soon as they said the material is my God, creation is my God, creatures are my God, then God kicked them out of the garden and didn't give them access to the trees anymore. No capacity for the other trees as well as the tree of life. All right, now, what's the point? The point is simply this. The few moments we have remaining, these trees and how to get the benefit of the trees of the world, representing food. Here's another interesting thing. In the garden, God's emphasis is upon the trees. This is kind of a neat thing. When you come up to a tree, what do you have to do? All you have to do is reach up to the branches and take your pick. The food is your servant. Creation is your servant. You don't have to bend your back. You don't have to break your back to get food if you're right with God. God planted the garden and put trees there. Just reach up and get it. Hey, nothing to it. But as soon as man went out of the garden, where is the focus? On the ground. You're going to have to put your nose down to the ground. That's your God. Bow down to it and serve it. Verse number 19 of chapter 3. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread till you return to the ground. Cursed, verse 17, is the ground for thy sake. Now, these two concepts become the four basic concepts of economy. I'm going to mention them and we'll take them up then this evening. How do I get blessings from God? Doing things His way and making creation my bona fide servant. That's what we call individualism and capitalism. Using raw materials, I have to work because I'm under the curse. But I will work to make my own garden so that creation can serve me as an individual. Do you see how that knocks out communism? You see, if you're individually responsible for your own life, then nine other guys, 9 out of the 10 who do not work, then the ground remains cursed to them. But you take the cursed ground and you develop it and you grow trees so that you can make creation your servant. That is capitalism. That is individualism. I'm responsible for planting my own garden. I need to eat. And that's what I'll do. All right? Now this is versus 2 other systems. Socialism says you don't have to own up to life, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to acquire skills. You allow somebody to work for you and we'll just tax them to death and pay you a commensurate salary to make everybody equal and happy. The flow of material comes this way because of spiritual capacity. The flow of material is forced this way because of artificial laws. And by the way, that's one thing we'll see tonight. The capitalist believes in natural laws of economy. Here's one of them. This is in the Walters book of economic axioms. If your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep becomes your downfall. You learn that and you apply it to your life, and I guarantee you, you'll be prosperous. What does America do? Our outgo is way ahead of our income. Where are we going? We're mounting up a debt, and that's becoming our downfall. Our banks are failing, our industries are failing, we're becoming bankrupt, and so forth. Now, that's a natural law, obviously. You reap what you sow, that's natural law. Under communism, there's artificial laws. And with this comment, we'll close. It's to make men equal through legislation. That's why your zealots and your advocates and so forth are all pushing their way into Congress to give meaning to their life and do something with their life in helping their fellow man by writing a law that says, this man, though this man works harder than this man, we're going to make them both equal and give them the same salary. And that's an artificial law. And that's why America is failing.